This is the business Blackbook, where billion-dollar empires are built and collapse. Every war that has ever been fought has had two kinds of casualties. The ones you read about in history books, and the ones no one talks about. The people who lost everything, not on a battlefield, but in a bank account. This video is not about war strategy. This is not about geopolitics. This is about one very specific question that most financially aware people never ask themselves until it is too late. If the system collapses tomorrow, what do you actually own? Not what is written in your account. Not what your portfolio says on a screen. What do you actually own? Because here is the brutal truth that history keeps proving over and over again. When war breaks out, when currencies collapse, when governments panic, paper wealth disappears first, and real wealth transfers. It does not vanish. It moves from the hands of the unprepared into the hands of those who understood something most people never learn. Today we are going to decode exactly that. 6 assets that are not just better than cash. They are the only things that survive when everything else burns. Let us start from the beginning. When most people think about financial safety, they think about savings. A solid bank balance, a growing stock portfolio, a fixed deposit, a government bond. And in normal times, these things work. But here's the problem. Every single one of those instruments has one fatal vulnerability. They all depend on the system working. They depend on banks staying open. They depend on governments staying stable. They depend on currencies holding their value. And history has shown us, again and again, that when real chaos hits, the system does not hold. So the question is not how much money you have. The question is, where is that money stored? Because in a crisis, the container matters more than the amount. Let us understand this with a very specific historical moment. Germany, 1923, the Weimar Republic. One of the most devastating economic collapses in modern history. A banker in Berlin had spent 30 years saving meticulously. Government bonds, savings accounts, Deutschmarks stored carefully. He did everything right, by the rules of his time. But by November of 1923, his entire life savings could not purchase a single cup of coffee. Not a house, not a meal, not even coffee. His money existed, but it had no value. Now 40 miles outside Berlin, there was a farmer. He woke up the same morning, walked to the same fields, harvested the same grain. His life did not change, but his power did. Because as the city burned economically, people needed to eat. And he had food. People brought their grand pianos to his doorstep, their jewelry, their fine clothing, their family heirlooms. All of it for one sack of flour. Same country, same crisis, same year. One man destroyed, one man thriving. The only difference was what they owned. This is the core principle you need to understand before we go any further. Wealth is never destroyed in a crisis. It is transferred from those holding fragile assets to those holding real ones. And the people who come out of every major historical collapse with more than they started, they always had one thing in common. They understood which assets survive chaos. So let us go through all 6 of them, one by one. The first asset, and arguably the most underrated one in modern finance, is productive land. Not just any land. Not a plot in a city you bought to sell later. Productive land. Land that grows food. Land with water underneath it. Land that works for you. The Weimar example we just discussed, that farmer did not get lucky. He was protected by something no banker could print and no government could devalue. The ability to produce food. And this is not just a 1923 story. In 2008, Zimbabwe experienced one of the worst hyperinflation events in recorded history. Their currency became so worthless. People were walking around with notes worth trillions of Zimbabwe dollars, unable to buy a loaf of bread. Those with savings accounts, wiped out. Those with city investments, devastated. But farmers who had productive land, who had grain, livestock, water access, they became the most powerful people in the country during that crisis. Because you cannot eat paper. You cannot eat a stock certificate. No matter how bad things get, no matter how broken the system becomes, people will always need to eat 3 times a day. This is why today, some of the most sophisticated investors in the world are quietly buying farmland. Not apartment buildings, not commercial complexes, farmland, because they understand something most retail investors never learn. In the deepest financial darkness, the person who controls food controls everything. The second asset has survived every single currency collapse in human history, and it is one of the oldest stores of value ever known. Gold. Now let us be very precise here. Gold is not an investment in the traditional sense. It does not pay dividends. It does not give you quarterly returns. But it does one thing that no paper currency has ever managed to do across a long enough timeline. It holds its value. Think about the French Revolution. The government introduced a brand new paper currency called the assignat. People trusted it. They used it. Life continued. 5 years later, the currency had lost 99% of its value. 5 years. Those who held paper lost almost everything. Those who converted to gold, their wealth remained completely intact. This pattern has repeated itself throughout history with remarkable consistency. Roman denarius, Ottoman aki, Weimar Deutschmark, Zimbabwe dollar, Venezuelan bolivar. Every single time a currency collapses, gold remains. And here is something that should make you pause for a moment. The very central banks that print your paper money, the institutions that give you those notes and ask you to trust them, they themselves have been aggressively buying and holding gold reserves for the past 30 years. Think about what that tells you. The institution handing you paper is itself holding gold. Gold is not a relic. It is the oldest financial insurance policy in human civilization. The third asset is one that most people overlook completely because they are too focused on passive investments. Essential business. But let us be very specific here, because not all business is equal in a crisis. Luxury is the first to collapse. Fine dining, fashion brands, premium electronics, exotic travel. In a crisis, all of that dies almost immediately. But essential goods business, that is a different story entirely. Brazil, 1980. Hyperinflation was so severe that supermarket employees were changing price tags on products multiple times a day. A loaf of bread that cost 100 units in the morning cost 500 by evening and 1,000 by night. People with paper savings were devastated. But companies holding essential goods, food, cooking oil, fuel, medicine, they were not just surviving. They were thriving. Because when money loses value, things gain value. And businesses that trade in things people cannot live without, they have the ability to reprice in real time. Their product stays relevant regardless of what happens to the currency. If you own a business, or are planning one, ask yourself one question in a crisis scenario. Would people still need what I am selling if everything fell apart tomorrow? If the answer is yes, you have built an asset that crisis cannot touch. If the answer is no, you have built something fragile. The fourth asset is one that historically only the wealthy understood. And that gap in understanding is precisely why wealth concentrated during every major crisis. Foreign currency exposure. When one country's currency collapses, it does not mean every currency collapses. In 1980, when Latin America went through its massive debt crisis, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, country after country watching their currencies spiral downward. The middle class, who had kept all their savings in local currency, lost everything. But the wealthy families, the ones who understood how to think across borders, they had already moved a portion of their savings into stable foreign currencies. US dollars, Swiss francs, other stable stores. And they came through the crisis with their wealth largely preserved. Now this does not mean blindly converting everything into dollars today. Global dynamics are shifting. But the principle remains deeply important. Never keep all your wealth inside one single currency system. Diversification across currencies is not paranoia. It is historical wisdom. The fifth asset is one that people understand the value of in good times, but never think deeply enough about in the context of crisis. Real estate. But once again, let us be precise. Because in the short term of a crisis, real estate looks like it is struggling too. Weimar Germany again. Buildings in Berlin. Their nominal prices went to billions of marks. The numbers were meaningless because the currency was meaningless. But here is what happened in the medium term. Those buildings were still standing. People still needed roofs over their heads. And as the currency was reformed, as a new system was established, the value of those physical properties recovered and then significantly exceeded their original worth. Because shelter, like food, is non-negotiable for human beings. Paper wealth is a promise. Real estate is a structure that exists in physical reality. And physical reality survives what paper cannot. Now we arrive at the sixth asset. And this one is the most powerful of all. Because unlike land, unlike gold, unlike real estate, this asset requires no capital to build. It cannot be frozen by a bank. It cannot be taxed into irrelevance. It cannot be devalued by a government printing more of it. And no war, no crisis, no collapse has ever been able to take it away from someone who truly has it. That asset is essential skill. Hungary, 1946. The worst hyperinflation event in recorded human history. Prices were doubling every 15 hours. Government employees with fixed salaries became destitute almost overnight. But the electricians kept working. The plumbers kept working. The mechanics, the carpenters, the bakers. They negotiated payment not in currency, but in food, in goods, in services. When the formal economy completely collapsed, the economy did not stop. It shifted. It became a barter system. And in that barter system, the person with a real skill was the wealthiest person in the room, because they had something everyone needed, something no printing press could manufacture, something no government could confiscate. Skills are the one asset that inflates in value during a crisis, at the exact moment every other asset is being tested. And this is the most important thing to understand. You do not need to wait for a crisis to start building this asset. You can begin today. Whatever you learn, truly learn, in a deep and practical way. That knowledge lives inside you. And that is the one place no crisis can reach. So let us bring this all together. When a financial crisis hits, when war disrupts economies, when currencies fail and systems break, wealth does not disappear. It redistributes from those holding fragile paper assets into the hands of those who built real ones. The six assets that history has proven to survive every form of financial chaos are these. Productive land, because food is power when money is worthless. Gold, because it has held value for thousands of years while every paper currency eventually fails. Essential goods business, because people never stop needing the basics even when they stop buying luxuries. Stable foreign currency exposure, because no single nation's monetary system should hold all your trust. Real estate, because physical shelter exists in reality where paper promises cannot reach. And essential skills, because the most durable asset you will ever own is one that lives inside you. This is not about fear. This is not about panic. This is about the kind of clear-eyed financial thinking that separates those who merely survive a crisis from those who quietly, deliberately, emerge from it stronger. The question is not whether a crisis is coming. History suggests one always is. The question is simply this. When it arrives, which side of the wealth transfer will you be on? And with that, the Black Book closes. Subscribe, and we will open the next page soon.